Howdy there, welcome back to the channel. My name's Evan, or EJ, you can call me either one. And today, we're going to be looking at my top 10 list of my favorite comic book movies of all time. Because I am out of ideas and list videos are easy to make, so let's go. Now, coming in at the number 10 spot on my list, I have Kingsman: The Secret Service. This is probably the one I have the least to say about it. Uh, Also, I've never read the Kingsman comics. In fact, for a long time, I didn't even know this was a comic book movie. But a few years ago, well, a few years ago, it's been a while, but I found out, and it made its way onto my top 10 favorite comic book movies list. I just love so much about this movie. First of all, Taron Egerton in the lead role is really great. He's a really charismatic actor, so he's really fun to watch when he's on screen. Um, Samuel L. Jackson is really entertaining as the villain. He's faking that lisp the whole time, so that's pretty entertaining. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about this movie. It's really good, and I really enjoy it. So now coming in at the number 9 spot on my list, I have Batman 1989. Um, Now certain aspects of this movie really don't hold up by today's standards. For instance, Michael Keaton's costume, the neck doesn't turn, so anytime he wants to look around, he has to turn his whole body, and it looks really goofy. Not something that holds up the best. The Batmobile not being able to turn unless he shoots a grappling hook onto a pole or something and swings it around the corner. Not the best. However, I love this movie so much because it's one of the first superhero movies that I remember watching, and it's one of the things that really got me interested in comic books and comic book characters and comic book movies as a whole. And there's just so much to love about it. Like, first of all, Jack Nicholson is great as the Joker. He puts in a really great performance here. Michael Keaton, even though he's a very odd pick for Batman, is actually really good in the role. I actually really enjoy his take on Batman. Um, I really enjoy Tim Burton's style in this movie, and it's even more apparent his style is in Batman Returns, the sequel. I really like just how kind of dark and sort of gothic looking everything is, and I think it's actually creates a really unique looking Gotham and just world for all these characters to live in. So that's something I've always really enjoyed. Is there anything else I want to mention? I really like the way his Batmobile looks in this movie too. It's probably my favorite live action Batmobile. It's just got a very classic look to it. I'm also more of a fan of when the Batmobile looks more like a car than it does a tank, so this is right up my alley. Um, yeah, that's about all I've got to say for it. It's just a movie that I really enjoy and have a lot of fond memories with, so that's why it's at my number 9 spot. Now coming in at the number 8 spot, I have X-Men Days of Future Past. Aside from Logan, I think this is easily the best movie in the X-Men franchise. Um, I just love almost everything about this movie. There's nothing that sticks out to me immediately as flawed or something I would change. First of all, Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. He's always great in the role, so never really gonna have any complaints about that. Um, I really like how James McAvoy portrays young Charles Xavier in this movie. It's just a very interesting way to show how much he's, kind of lost it in those years, and I've always really enjoyed that. Um, Also, Michael Fassbender is really great as Magneto, as well as Ian McKellen, who's in this movie too. Not as much, but he is in it a little bit. Uh, why can't I never remember his name? Patrick Stewart is really great as Charles Xavier in this also. I really enjoy seeing both the young versions of the characters and the old version at the same time, and the best scene in the movie, or one of the best scenes at least, is that scene where young Charles and old Charles interact and they talk to each other for a while. That's such a great scene, and they both actors handle it very well. To be honest, I'd like a whole movie that's just the future scenes in this movie. Like, it looks really cool. I like how dark and depressing everything looks. The Sentinels are pretty intimidating. Um, I really like the opening of this movie too. How it just starts with like a ton of mutants just getting murdered off rip. I thought that was really interesting, and like a cool way to start the movie. This movie came out when I was 9 years old, so seeing that, I was like, huh? Because I don't remember any of the trailers either, so I think that just kind of caught me by surprise. Caught me by surprise. I every time I mess up talking, every single time. But let's see, is there anything else? Jennifer Lawrence is good as Mystique, although I feel like as these movies go on, she just cares less and less about playing this character. Like, she's still good in this one, but by the time you get to like Dark Phoenix, you can tell that she has just like checked out of the franchise. But yeah, let's see. I think that's about all I've got to say about it. Really great movie. My favorite X-Men movie that's not just a standalone Wolverine movie. Yeah, that's my number 8. Now coming in at the number 7 spot on my list, I have Avengers Infinity War. Um I think this is the best Avengers movie by a bit. Um First of all, it's less of an Avengers movie and more of a Thanos movie, and I really like that cuz Thanos in the MCU is a very interesting character, just like the way he goes about everything. I also really like this is one of it's the only Avengers movie where the Avengers themselves aren't like unified because this is the first Avengers movie after Civil War. So the whole team is kind of split up and kind of at odds with each other, and I think that makes for a really interesting, part of the story because like Iron Man and Captain America are never even in the same room in this movie. They never talk to each other. Um so I've always really liked that. Also, I like how many different places this movie goes to. Like you're in New York, you're in Wakanda, you're in space, you're on Titan, you're on different planets. Like I've always really liked just how many different locations this movie goes to and how none of it really feels super forced, or at least it never did to me. It didn't feel like they were trying to just jam in as many places as possible. It all felt, natural and like they needed to be there. Um Also, for how large the cast is in this movie, they handle it really well. Like, sure, some characters don't get as much dialogue as they normally would or as much screen time, but that's because there's like 80 different characters in this movie. Not everyone's going to get, a shining moment, but um I feel like everyone is handled pretty well. Most of the jokes land for me. I know a lot of people don't really like that MCU humor, but a lot of times the jokes do land for me. But let's see, is there anything else? Oh yeah, one of the greatest and most unexpected endings in any comic book movie ever. Like straight up half the universe died and the movie ends right there. Like obviously we knew they were probably going to come back in the next movie, but still that is an insane way to end the movie, and we had to wait a year to find out for sure what was going to happen next, which was one of the longest waits of my life. But it's also like one of my favorite movie going experiences ever. Like, not only being in the theater watching this movie, like when all the, like crowd pleasing moments happen, like Thor coming to Wakanda and Iron Man fighting Thanos and that stuff, but also just waiting for Endgame to come out and just seeing people speculate what could happen and even speculating about what the title of the next movie was. Because remember, at this point in time, we didn't know it was called Avengers Endgame. We just knew we were just calling it Avengers 4 and people were guessing what the title was. I remember I saw people guess Endgame, but I also saw people guessing Avengers Annihilation and stuff like that. So this was just a great time to not only be a Marvel fan, but just a comic book fan or a comic book movie fan because it was insane. Now coming in at my number 6 spot, I have The Dark Knight. Now, I realize this would probably be most people's number one, or at the very least in their top five. But excuse me, the way I go about ranking movies, it's not always about what is like objectively the best movie. Obviously, a lot of the times that does factor in because the movie still has to be good for it to make the list. But it's more about just like what movie sticks with me the most or, like means more to me. So that's why this isn't necessarily in the top 5. However, still, just what an incredible movie. Like, even if you're not a comic book fan, this is a great movie. Like, from top to bottom. Obviously, the main thing everyone loves about this movie is Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker. And, like, yeah, he is incredible in that role. Like, you don't even see Heath Ledger, that's just the Joker. Like, he disappeared into that role. Christian Bale is good as Batman. He's never been my favorite Batman. I think he's a great Bruce Wayne, but when it comes to like his performance as Batman, I just can't get past that goofy voice. I know it's like to hide his identity because like he's a famous guy, people would recognize his voice, but still there's better ways to go about hiding who he is. That voice just is not the play. But yeah, I just love this movie. It's really great, so that's why it's my number 6. Now coming in at my number 5 spot, I have Spider-Man 2. Uh this is arguably the best Spider-Man movie. I mean, I think Into the Spider-Verse is the best Spider-Man movie, but there's an argument to be made that this is the best. Um and it's one of my favorite comic book movies of all time just cuz like it handles everything super well. First of all, Doc Ock as a villain, Alfred Molina, he is great. Like I love him as the villain. Tobey Maguire is obviously great as Spider-Man. Um, Also, this has one of the most like iconic scenes in any comic book movie ever with that train fight where Tobey Maguire stops the train. That's such an incredible scene. Let's see, is there anything else? Also, a very quotable movie. Like I always hear people quoting stuff like "The power of the sun in the palm of my hand" and "It's pizza time." Also, the memes that come from the Raimi trilogy of Spider-Man movies are all so good. Like Bully Maguire, Pizza Time, uh, Gonna Put Some Dirt in Your Eye. Like they're all really funny. So that's another thing I really like about these movies.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
But is there anything else that I'm missing? Something I've never been a huge fan of, and this is no disrespect to Kirsten Dunst or Kristen Dunst or however you say her name. I've never liked her version of Mary Jane. That's not her fault. It's mainly due to the way she's written. But she's just such an unlikable character to me. But that's really like the only flaw that immediately sticks out to me with this movie. Everything else I pretty much love, so that's why it's at my number 5 spot. Now coming in at my number 4 spot, I have The Batman. Uh, this is probably, I think, the most like recently released entry into my top 10 because it just came out last year. It hasn't even been a full year since it released, but it's just so good. I love everything about it. I love Robert Pattinson as Batman. I love Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. I love the way Gotham looks in this movie. Colin Farrell was great as the Penguin. Paul Dano as the Riddler. Like I love the story. I love that it's mainly like more detective based than it is like a straight up action movie. And even then, like the action sequences are all great. That whole chase with the Batmobile was awesome. I love pretty much everything about this movie. Like I know a lot of people say like towards the end of the third act it starts to drag a bit for them, but I don't feel that at all. I love this movie from start to finish. Like everything about it is just so good to me. But yeah. Now coming in at my number 3 spot, I have Captain America Civil War. This is my favorite MCU movie, like period. I know a lot of people would probably have like Captain America the Winter Soldier over this, but and like that is an incredible movie and it probably is like objectively better, but something about this movie just sticks with me a lot more. Like I love this movie so much. I like first of all what it does in terms of like the Avengers as a team. I love how it splits them up and kind of like essentially just tears them apart from the inside. But also like the time leading up to this movie was really interesting, just seeing people like debate and talk about who they think was right or who was wrong. Um, I and like it, I even still see people talk about that and debate it to this day, like whether Tony was right or Cap was right. Uh, Me personally, I definitely think Cap was right there, but that's just me. Um, I also think Daniel Bruhl is really great as Zemo. He's a really great villain and one of the few villains in the MCU who actually fully succeeded in their plan. Like he just wanted to split the Avengers up, and he did exactly that. So I think that's really neat. Is there anything else? Oh yeah, this movie introduces both Black Panther and Spider Man, which is awesome. Seeing both of them in the trailer for the first time when this movie was coming out was so cool to me. Like I remember just grinning from ear to ear, looking really stupid while doing it while watching the trailer for this movie. Like I was so excited for this like leading up to it.
On the roof!
Hey everyone.
And that's why it's at my number 3 spot. Now coming in at my number 2 spot, I have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is just like very easily one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. It's also one of my favorite animated movies ever made. It's so perfect. Like the animation style is great, the characters are all really fun, the story's good, the voice acting is really well done. Like everything about it is just so good. Excuse me. Um it would probably be my number 1, but there's one movie on the list that just like kind of means a bit more to me just like in terms of like how it resonated with me and just like how much it stuck with me over the years, but this could very easily be my number 1. But like I also really like how it's more of a Miles story than it is Peter, because I feel like this did a really good job of introducing like a more mainstream audience to Miles as a character and like getting people to be more open about another Spider-Man. So that's something I've always really liked. Like just everything about this movie, I love it. So that's at my number 2. Now I'm gonna throw in a few honorable mentions because there's a few more movies that I wanted to include on the list, but there's only 10 spots, so I had to throw them in the honorable mention section. The first one is Guardians of the Galaxy. I really love that movie. I think it does a good job of introducing everyone to the Guardians as characters and like making them more household names. Um, it's really funny. The story's really good. The only real complaint I have with it is I feel like the villain could be stronger, but other than that, I love that movie like to death. Uh, Another one I want to mention is the first Avengers movie, mainly because, well, first of all, it is a good movie, but also just because it's the first time anything like that had ever been done in a comic book movie. Like they took like well, I'm tripping over my words here. They had a bunch of movies leading up to it, like Iron Man and Captain America, and then they brought all of that together into one movie, and no one thought it could be done, but they did it beautifully, and it launched a lot of what the MCU is now, whether you like that or not. But yeah, that's another honorable mention. And the last honorable mention is X-Men 2. One of the best X-Men movies, a lot of people's favorite. I prefer Days of Future Past over it, but this movie is great. It takes pretty much everything that the first one did well and like does it better and like fixes a lot of stuff that wasn't as good from the first one. Like the villain's great. Hugh Jackman is obviously still good as Wolverine. Like there's just a lot of really good stuff about this movie, so that's why it's in the honorable mention section. All right, and now we're here at my number 1 spot, which is Logan. Uh, this is honestly my favorite movie. Not just my favorite comic book movie, but my favorite movie. And I know that there are movies that are probably like a lot better than it, and people would probably be like kind of weirded out if they heard this was like my favorite movie above everything else. But like, it just means so much to me. Like, it's the first movie that ever made me cry, and I still cry sometimes when I watch it to this day. Um, it's like it's the ending of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Patrick Stewart's Charles Xavier, or at least it was. It looks like Deadpool 3 is kind of gonna have something to say about that, but that's besides the point. It's just, it's beautifully written and directed and acted. Like, everything about it is just so good. Like, I guess if I had to pick something that I'm not a huge fan of, I guess the villains could be stronger, but like, even then, I feel like they're like well done, and I still enjoy them. So yeah, I really just have no problems with this movie, and it's just stuck with me uh, through the years. I know it's been coming up on like 6 years, I think, since this movie came out, uh, which is crazy to say out loud. It does not feel like it's been that long, but yeah, this is it. It's just my favorite comic book movie with ease. I love it so much. And that's my list. Let me know what your top 10 favorite comic book movies are in the comments down below. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you don't miss any of my future uploads. I usually upload every Sunday. And that's about all I've got for you today. See ya.